So I learned how to sing. Then I thought I wanted money so I could buy a nice thing. When I found it was as empty as could be, and now I'm staring at my face above a bathroom.
You can see that or not? I hope you can. It's like this little black residue floating in here. Is this safe to drink or use? Or should we discard it? Is it just because we didn't filter it good enough? Okay, good morning guys. I just wanted to come to you today. I'm going to do a little video on some of the mistakes that we made during the maple syrup processing. So stay tuned and have a nice day. I just love how these little seedlings are trying to stretch towards the sunshine. It's so fascinating to me. So the spring cleanup has begun. Frank got a little device, so all the stones that got spit on here from blowing the snow off the driveway. It's pretty aggressive on the grass, but it helps. I don't know if you can see it, but it helps to thatch the grass. Scrapes off all the gunk. Oh, here's a better spot. You can see that. Lesson number one, lesson learned, was, I wouldn't suggest that it was a mistake, but it was definitely a lesson that we learned, and we'll do better next year, which was be more prepared for the season once it's here. We were very reactionary to the season. Somebody had kind of reached out and asked us whether or not we were going to tap our trees, and we'd lived here on the property for about 3 years, and it kind of just made sense that we would do it. So we jumped into action because the time is right, and we were a couple weeks late for the sap run because we did have a bit of a peculiar season this year with the weather. But we did start, and we ended up tapping the trees, and the sap was flowing. It was flowing quite nicely. But then it came time to boiling it off. And the only process that we had, or the system that we had, was a 3 boiler burner on propane, which was perfect. It actually worked well, and it processed our first little bit of sap that we collected. Problem being is it was extremely expensive. So the propane of the 30 pounders, I'll show you, like these propane tanks here is what we used, and to fill one of those, I think, if I'm not mistaken, each one of them was maybe 50 bucks possibly. So anyways, I'm not exactly sure what he spent in propane, but when we figured out the calculations and we figured out the yield, we could have purchased it cheaper at the local sugar shack or the grocery store. So it didn't make sense to do it that way. So we had to figure out a solution to burn off the sap with wood. So it was a really good deal, so we kind of decided to take advantage of it. And I'll show you here, this is what it was. So it's a really massive stainless steel, and it was, by all rights, a really good purchase. But as you can see, we didn't realize how much sap it was going to take to use something this big. And we just didn't tap enough trees to do that. So when we started boiling off, we just realized that this system is way too big for this year. So maybe next year we'll tap more trees, and we might be able to put this one into use. But and Frank figured out another solution, so let's go there and take a look. Okay, I can't believe that thing is growing. I cannot believe that this is happening. So this is kind of the weirdest thing. So this is fascinating to me. We cut this tree branch off because it was poking people in the eye. So my son came over here and literally stuck it into my pot, and it's blooming. This is a maple. Tell me something, boy. This is something fascinating. This is so cool. I really would have thought that the leaf or the branch would have died. once we cut it off. Interesting. Okay, so.
All right. This is our new little homemade maple syrup evaporator.
The secondary solution to the burning off problem was that system that I just showed you was way too big for the sap yield that we had taken off. So Frank had sourced out a young lad who was making this brilliant little invention. So in essence, all he's done is he's taken an old steel drum, just a regular old steel drum, and he's torched it out and put these, crimp those down so that the buckets can sit on top, and the fire will escape through that with this little pipe. And you guys, this was made by a 14-year-old who was doing this as a little side hustle. And when Frank pulled up to get it, he was a little bit like, oh, it's a little bit elementary, but you know what? Because it was a young guy doing it, he felt this was quite genius. So it's got a little thing there, and you can feed your fire through here. Frank put those bricks in because it was just easier to keep the fire up and get the air underneath too. So you could leave this door open to get more air circulation and just feed the fire this way. This was a great solution, and we burned off a little bit. We were able to save quite a bit of the propane cost. The problem with this is, as you can see, this is really more intended for a small sap yield. So we were in between now the large sap and the small sap. And unfortunately, we just didn't know how much each tree would yield as far as syrup or sap goes. So then he created this himself. So he kind of took the concept of this young man's idea and kind of decided to do this. This is kind of Frank's version of that. So we had this old steel drum in the back, and my son and his buddy were going to make a smoker out of this. And they had done already this part with the door. And Frank literally just cut the top off of it and then put the little circle thing there for the smokestack. He put a grid inside so that the fire could be high and lots of airflow, and the ashes just fell down inside. So this was kind of a vessel that we used for the fire because we were given a frying boiler from another sugar shack that was going to get rid of it. So it kind of came in brilliantly, like as far as being able to work out for us. It worked really well. But again, that, I'll show it to you here, was also a little too big because although we filled it, by the time that the sap, or the 40-to-1 ratio, when we got the boil down from the 40-to-1, it didn't have enough syrup in the entire bottom of the pan to allow for it to not burn in certain segments. And next year we'll know how much syrup to sap ratio we need to fill these vessels. And we'll just tap a few more trees. That was the other thing too, because we were reactionary this year. We tapped what we thought was sugar maples, and we just didn't know. We just don't know if they were. I think Frank tapped a couple of oak trees. That was probably mistake number 2. Don't tap oak trees or birch or other trees that sugar maple, silver maple, and red maple were what we tap most of. So we'll take the time this summer to go through the bush and really kind of mark them so that we know which ones we're going to tap next year, so that we know how much yield we can get. So that's kind of the biggest thing, is trying to figure out that ratio, because it's quite a, I figured we kind of mindlessly went into it thinking we could just tap the tree, get the sap, boil it off, have maple syrup. Well, in theory that makes sense, but there is a process. So always year one is always a learning curve for everything we learn. So I kind of feel like next year we'll be a little more prepared. Year 1 of maple syrup processing. We'll do it again next year. We've learned a lot this year. And I hope that this helps anybody wanting to try and start doing something like this. Just, I think the biggest lesson is to don't underestimate how much syrup or how much sap you require to make some syrup. And the best thing to do is to store it in the freezer. It will last a lot longer. But it does have a good strong shelf life. But the one thing that we also made a mistake on was filtering. We didn't filter properly. Somebody had said you can't use dirty pantyhose to filter. Filtering is very key and very important so that we don't get any sediment, and it also will help to take out any of that sugar sand that comes if you've either boiled it too long, or maybe a couple of our bottles did have some of that stuff in it, so learned how to filter properly. Also gave us or loaned us a couple of his filters so that we can make sure that we filtered it properly. And earlier, this community is incredibly supportive, and so it was very nice to be able to be taught from veterans that they've made, and we can learn from their lessons. So that's kind of what I love about the, you know, it takes a village kind of thing.
It measures the bricks in the maple syrup. How much did this cost?
I wish you could smell it. That was $39.
Yeah, so I mean, but really at the end of the day, if you want to have proper consistency to your maple syrup, you need to have 66.6. I mean, really, I mean, 66.6, like, I mean, 666, I mean, really. I mean, we know that sugar is the devil, but maple syrup just tastes like a little bit of heaven, so I kind of think there's a little bit of irony there. But anyways, so you take your, there's a little lens here, and you take a little tiny bit of your sap, of your syrup, and you just drip it on your top of your refractometer here. And you close the lens. Strip it off. Oh, that's starting to look really nice. And you close this off so that it seals the top. And when you look through, there's a little line.
Oh yeah.
Can you see it?
Yep.
So as soon as it gets to 66 bricks, it is done. What I've been doing before is I've been doing it based on temperature. You don't realize how many people are doing maple syrup. It's a lot of fun. It's a really great community of people. They're very friendly, very nice. I can't get over how much they want you to know. They want you to learn. And it's really refreshing because, I mean, Mother Nature provides the sap. I think that really in the homesteading community or in the self-sustaining community, it's such a nice, refreshing group of people that help you and talk to you and give you everything that you need. It was 219 when I pulled it off, but my bricks was only 64. I don't know the difference between 64 and 66.6. It's worse to go over than it is to go under, because if it goes over, it creates what they call maple sand. And that sand will actually settle to the bottom of your syrup. And that to me is not a pure maple syrup. It's, you know, the boiling temperature of water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and the boiling degrees of 66.6 bricks is 219 to 220. So
maple syrup has a sweet spot.
At this point, you've spent all the hours on your evaporator. You've spent all the hours to prep and to pull it off the trees. This is the end result. Spend the 30 bucks. Because this is after the hours and hours that you've spent, this little tiny bit of syrup is your result. And if you don't do it right from here for the next 30 minutes, then the previous 25 hours that you took to collect it all, to bring it over to your storage, to put it on the fire, to tend the fire, to make sure it doesn't burn, to non-stop work.
It comes down to the last 30 minutes.
This is the last 30 minutes. Make sure it's right. Do it right. That's what these guys have said to me. You know, you can get to this stage and then mess it up. Don't mess it up. Spend the 30 bucks for the refractometer. Know that you're at 66.6. And then you're going to have good tasting syrup.
What do you think there, Daddy-O?
I think it's awesome. I'm so happy. I don't know why we got onto this. Why did we start doing this? I don't understand.
Somebody asked us if we tapped our trees, and we were like, no, but we should be.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, this has been really exciting. This has been, for as late as we started this year, this has been a really fun process.
And we learned to store it on its side till it had a chance to settle versus on the upright, and to try and fill it to as much as the top to eliminate the air. This was another lesson learned. We didn't fill the other containers to the top.
Coming for to carry me home, and the angel coming here for me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low.
It does that.
Yeah.
It's got a corner that it runs, and you always add down here,
Yep.
and it pushes
Yep.
forward, 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 and then
Coming for to carry me home. Coming for to carry me home.
That's a little warm on you. Right. The fireman will be on fire.
All this cloth comes off,
Okay,
stored away.
right. And what exactly is that? What is that
It's
exactly?
like firewall material.
Gotcha.
They use that like firemen in asbestos. It's not asbestos, but it's like a fire retardant
Okay,
that you put in clothes. Like firefighters will have it inside your clothes, or
gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, like in when they're steel mills and when they're you know hot ingots of metals or whatever, they'll have that.
You have to have it.
If not, it would be flaming up.
Gotcha.
and
thicker.
you got less syrup than you wanted.
Yeah.
And you might get a little sugar on the
I
bottom.
was gonna say, can you tell me what is the rationale with the cream? What is exactly happening there?
Down, you get rid of some bubbles.
It would come right over.
It's like,
Oh, there we go.
And if you get too much bubbles all the way
Yeah.
through, if it's all bubbles,
Yeah.
the air gets to the bottom and
Yeah.
can burn the bottom of
Burn
the
it.
pan.
what?
So you knock it down to get some of the air out of it, really.
Hit her.
That's it. See, look at
Look at that.
it. See that?
When I got that.
See how it's running, right? Yeah.
Coming for to carry me home.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Coming for to carry me
What would you
home.
say that is for temp? Like it's 219 or 218?
We don't go by 10.
You don't go by temp.
We go by the
66.
Well, did you get there before I do? Coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends.
I'm looking forward to doing it next year.
Oh yeah, we're gonna just make it right, do it right.
Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe
The
and keep well.
only thing I haven't found somehow. There are other places, there are a million pretty faces.